He is a computer science graduate from Queen Mary, University of London. He has a professional experience in technology, finance, and entrepreneurship. Nzube is based in London, and in 2009, he founded Amu Venture Capital Advisory, which is a business that supports small and medium-scale enterprises, especially those who are involved in technology and entrepreneurship. As we heard this morning, the small and medium enterprises are the engine for Africa's growth right now. So we think Nzube is doing something really lofty. He's passionate about technology, media, and entertainment. He recently led a team that organized the first Africa Creative Industries Investment Summit in London, and that was a very powerful summit. It was very successful. Nzube is going to be the moderator for this panel. So, Nzube.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Nzube Felipe. Nice to be here. I don't know if you can hear me. Okay, I'll just project since it seems the microphone's not working yet. But this panel session today would focus on the growing world of African media and entertainment. As Dane mentioned, I worked heavily with creative professionals for the African Creative Industries Investment Summit. Our parent company focuses on technology, media, and telecoms. However, through the media strand, we've started looking more into the Africa creative sector. So without further ado, I'll let each member of the panel introduce themselves and give a quick preliminary overview of the landscape as they see it from their point of view. So I'll begin with Nadia Denton, first to my right, please.
So just to give you a bit of an intro as to who I am and my background, I started out in the film industry about 10 years ago in the area of exhibition, so putting on film festival screenings, film club screenings. I've worked at a lot of the major arts and film venues in London, such as the Institute of Contemporary Arts, the BFI, and so on. So I have quite extensive experience working with diverse audiences and bringing them into mainstream venues. After a couple of years, I then wanted to spread out and look at what else I could do in this sector. And this led to me writing my first book, The Black British Filmmaker's Guide to Success. I self-published it, and it's available as a free download on my website. And it was really my attempt to catalogue some of the experiences of the filmmakers that I'd worked with, as well as looking at good practice for filmmakers in the areas of finance, marketing, distribution, etc. And at the moment, I'm currently writing my second book, looking at the Nigerian film industry. So looking at the best ways that what I see as a new class of Nigerian filmmakers who are making animation films, documentary, high concept Nollywood films, and Nigerian filmmakers in the diaspora, the ways in which they can best interact with a new Nigerian cinema or industry, as well as the Western markets. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions for Nadia. As we all know, Nollywood and film in Africa is very popular. So next, for a brief introduction, if we can have Shola Oyebade introduce himself, that'd be fantastic.
Hi everyone. My name's Shola Oyebade, also known, being in the entertainment industry, I have a also known name, aka Mr. Mahogany. I actually started, quite interestingly enough, in retail banking. Taken on as a graduate recruitment for the Abbey National then. Didn't last very long, found it very boring. Anyway, then moved into entertainment, which I've been in for over 35 years now. Yes, I am older than I look. I'm a show producer as a profession, primarily in the fashion industry. So I do things like London Fashion Week, Glasgow Fashion Week, a number of events. I work around the world producing events. Very recently, I decided to make a life-changing decision, which was to relocate my business, Mahogany International, to Nigeria. And it's been interesting. I won't say this is why I became grey, but it has been very interesting. But I mean, you'll get to hear some about the differences between working in Nigeria and working, well, around Africa and working in the UK much later on.
Thank you. And we've got a brief introduction by Ike next. If we can get the slides rolling, because I believe you have some slides they're going to be showing.
I think it might even work better
Okay.
just, instead of doing the slides, just to kind of really do a quick overview, and then maybe afterwards,
Please.
just to save time, really. My name's Ike Onora. Thank you for having us today. And my background really is in music. I suppose to kind of start things off, I've come from managing an orchestra to working in running a music venue to doing a number of different types of live tours and concerts and things like that. And it's really, we between me and my business partners, we've just taken that kind of concept and understanding, working in those particular fields and looking at what's going on in Africa and seeing how can we now apply those things. So, for example, working with the orchestra, we had to do a lot of stuff with the PRS, filling out the forms, musicians, if a song gets recorded, all the different musicians that played on it, as well as the songwriters, so that everything could be accounted for, and the royalties could come to the relevant people. So when we started looking at our African business model, it was really about looking at what's going on in Africa, and what's kind of finding the opportunities in terms of where our expertise could fit into this. So if you look at what's going on in Africa, they've got a lot of record companies, PR companies, management companies, but what really doesn't exist over there is music publishing. And if you look at the international world, this is where the heart of the money is. Intellectual property. And so it was really about now sitting down, engaging with the powers that be in Africa in terms of where intellectual property is based. Why aren't they able to operate in the kinds of way in terms of how we see it internationally, and what kind of things can be done? And then from there we sat down with key players in the international music industry that deal with intellectual property, the PRS, Performing Rights Society, PPL, Broadcast Music Inc., and looked at strategies in terms of what's going on in Africa and what type of model can be applied to aid these artists in terms of getting their intellectual property. And I suppose we can get into that further on.
Sure. Thank you. And last but not least, Pauline Long will be introducing herself and giving a brief overview of the industry. I think she's got some slides as well, if you'd like to get those rolling. Is there any, or would you like to just kick off using the, yeah, while they try to set that up, sure.
My name is Pauline Long, and thank you very much for inviting me here today. I actually started in hospitality, something that you don't know. I started by making beds in hotels, and I ended up being a guest relations manager at the big hotel, Mandarin Oriental, in Hyde Park, saying hello to the Queen and David Beckham and everybody else. At that point, I realized I wanted to relate to a lot of people, and I then settled with a family, and I quit my full-time job in hospitality. But I still wanted to carry on, working with people, and especially young people. So then I went on to establish a beauty pageant. And don't underestimate the power of beauty queens. That's why Oprah is where she is. She started off as a beauty queen, Halle Berry, and a lot more. So I wanted to work with young people and encourage them to get into different sectors. And for me, especially fashion and the arts and film was something that I was very interested in. Organizing the beauty pageant for about 7 years, I worked with so many DJs, presenters, and musicians and comedians, and knocking so many doors and asking them, people like Sola, can you come and judge my show for free? I don't have money, just come and do these things for me. But I realized that we were working so hard and so many people doing favors, but there was no award ceremony patting our backs at the end of the year. There was no gathering for the African Caribbean community in the UK, celebrating these people, and also helping them to get to the next level, or helping them to break, the film, fashion, television, arts industry in the UK, but also preparing them for Africa. So then I decided to establish the Black Entertainment, Film, Fashion, TV and Arts Awards, which is currently the biggest award ceremony for Africans and Caribbeans in those sectors in Europe. We are in America, we are in Canada, Australia, and very soon in Africa, not Nigeria, sorry. Possibly Kenya, and of course Australia, and we've just launched in the Caribbean in Jamaica. One of the things I had was, passion for encouraging young people, but even older people, that, people like Sola, sorry to refer to you as older, but, I saw people like Sola working very, very hard, but they were not appreciated. They were not encouraged to go to the next level, which possibly that's why you got the courage to now go and set up in Africa. So we decided to set up the award ceremony to give these people a platform to go to the next level. And the other thing that I also got into very recently, 2 years ago, was the film industry. And I run one of the biggest independently owned film studios, which is the East End Studios. Again, working with very young people in the African Caribbean community to sort of get involved in the film industry. Yeah.
Thank you, Pauline. As you can all see, there's a rich diversity in terms of the creative backgrounds of each member of the audience. They're very talented, and each would be happy to answer questions. So while you're thinking about questions, I'll just kick off with the first one or two. You've already given a brief overview of your backgrounds and how you got into where you are. So in light of what we're talking about today, do you mind sort of projecting and saying what you think the industry is going to become? What can we expect over the next maybe 2 to 3 years?
I'll kind of start.
Sure.
I mean, when looking at the music industry, there's huge developments that's happening in Africa as we speak. I mean, right now, if you look at Nollywood and music in terms of YouTube content, in a month, Nollywood hits around 40 million views. The music and entertainment industry in Nigeria hits around 60 million views. That's 100 million views a month. Now, when you look at it in terms of artists being able to streamline, monetize this type of content, the opportunities are huge. There is a huge argument that at least 80% of African artists are not yet fully aware of how they can access their funds online. For example, when I used to run the music venue, we had the elite of African artists that would come down, do the O2 Arena, and they would come down to our restaurant afterwards to eat, and we would sit down talking with them, and we'll be like, so you've done the O2, yes, okay, so you're going to get your PRS, your royalty rates for your live performances and all these different types of royalties. And they were looking at me like I was speaking a foreign language, and this was really the foundation for how we started developing our business model. I think when you look at entertainment and Africa, if you're looking to engage in that way, you've got to look at the disadvantages that exist over there, and in terms of looking at it in terms of ways of how you can create advantages out of those disadvantages. There is so much opportunities out there, but it's all about being able to unravel these and use them to your best interest.
Certainly in terms of film, and looking specifically in Nigeria, I would certainly imagine that we're going to have quite a few more breakout films which kind of merge the best of quote-unquote Nollywood and a more Hollywood or Western aesthetic of filmmaking. As we're speaking, more cinemas are being built, and I think we're going to have quite a sort of thriving culture in terms of public take-up and consumption of films through cinemas, and filmmakers being able to benefit more directly from the revenue from that. I also imagine that there's going to be some sort of quasi-studio setups whereby alongside the making of films, you're also going to have more increased training and development. So those are just a few of the projections that I imagine.
Well, in terms of... can you hear me? In terms of fashion trends in Africa, I mean, as you can see, everybody wearing African print, and like you on my right. That's Yeti D. The increase in the rise of the African fashion has just, made it so possible for the African fashion designer to trade, whether, it's online or whether they're coming to London to do the London Fashion Week or New York Fashion Week. There's a lot more that African designers can get from, especially from the UK. They're opening markets for us. I mean, at Selfridges, we've got African designers, selling their stuff there. So the African fashion market is a huge one that still needs to be tapped. Of course, the funding is a little bit shaky, but I see young African designers making designs from their own bedrooms and selling to their friends or their family. But in terms of the broader global market, we still need to work a lot harder so that we can exist on the high street just like all the other brands.
I think for me, I've been quite lucky in that I've seen both sides of the coin, and I mean, it should not be underestimated in any way how phenomenal the opportunities are within the whole of Africa for entertainment. I'm not just looking at Nigeria. I mean, the main countries, of course, are Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, South Africa. Those are the 4 main areas. If you want to go into somewhere quickly and try and build up something very fast, those are the countries you go to first. But there's other places, Gambia, so many other countries. But I mean, it was discussed in an earlier lecture I was in about how the media misrepresents how things are in Africa. And the middle class and the upper middle class, and of course the super rich, is phenomenal. When you look at things, some of the TV programs which are all familiar with, like Big Brother. Big Brother Africa is the biggest Big Brother syndicate in the world at the moment. You've got things like, was it Nigeria? I was going to call it, what's it called? Millionaire. What's the millionaire program called? Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? You've got that. You've now got Africa's next top supermodel. You've got The Apprentice. You've got X Factor. All of these are there, and these are not small budget things. These are absolutely phenomenal. Then you look at the music industry. You've got the exports like D'banj and Two-Face. A lot of people know African Queen, which was a super hit here, and there's so many other things like that. Fashion, you have the likes of Diola Sego, Stone Cherry. These are people that walk or featured on the catwalks of New York, Milan, Paris, and stuff like that. But they kind of get slowly, they're not really mentioned. Because anytime you do tend to mention Africa, it tends to be more the negative side. And it's one area that the governments have started to realize is an area they have to invest in. It's become, I would say, the second biggest growth industry after what I would call oil and mining and stuff like that, is entertainment. Everybody now, if you've got a child and they're a guy, they either want to be a footballer or they want to be a model or something like that. Women, it's a fashion designer or it's a model, and then afterwards it's banker, doctor, so on and so forth. Whereas with me, it was like, I remember why I had to go into retail banking when I first started was my dad said to me very clearly, "You are my son. I brought you into this world, I will take you out of this world if you ever think you are going to be a model." You understand? So I had to go down the corporate line. But it is definitely something that people should consider because the growth is, like I said, it's phenomenal.
Okay. While we're waiting for... Okay, yes, please. If you'd like to just quickly introduce yourself and ask your question.
My name's Afua, and I work as a business development director here within Cambridge University's Judge Business School within executive education. And I'm curious to know about soap operas. I know I work with a lot of Brazilian companies at the moment, and I know that they see Africa as a lucrative market for the sales of their soap operas. And so I'm curious to know about the competition from external markets, such as Brazil and India, in terms of them selling their products into Africa, and how that impacts on the local market.
Okay.
I can speak because I do have kind of first-hand knowledge now, and the truth of the matter is now Africa has got very patriotic. Yes. Okay, I mean, in terms of music, you do hear the occasional Beyonce and Jay-Z and stuff like that, but if you go to a club or you go to a party or anything like that, 90% of the time it is African-inspired music by African artists, period. If you start playing anything else, people don't want to know. In terms of soap operas, you know, things you have like Tinsel, I mean, they just had their 1000th episode last week. I mean, these are soap operas are shown because of DSTV, which is the equivalent of Sky, but it covers literally the whole of Africa. You can produce a soap in South Africa and it is shown across the whole of Africa. So instantly you are hitting all of those people. And I know people say, well, how many people have cable and so on and so forth, but you know, you go into any bar, they're showing it, you know. You'll see people, I know you see that thing on the stereotype on TV where you see about 200 people outside a shop window watching football. Yes, it does happen, but people will get to watch their things. And we've got Go TV. So you can watch your Sky, so I keep calling it Sky, you can watch your cable on the go. But I mean, the soap operas have become big. The people that are in them have become superstars. They're being paid proper money. It's very regulated, and it's a way to make money. Unlike the films where, for instance, I'm sure Nadia will talk about it, and Ike as well, and the same thing happens in music, which is, in Africa, generally, if you produce a record, you press it today, tomorrow there are 2 million copies, bootleg copies of it around everywhere. The same with the movie industry. But with the soap operas, it doesn't work like that. They get great sponsors. It's a good way of making money. And I can't even tell you one foreign soap opera we watch. Since I've been in Nigeria, I've not seen EastEnders. It's that bad.
Does anybody else want to add to that?
I'd say just adding on that.
Sure.
I mean, we're doing stuff musically with Brazil. Because what we're doing is, I know it's not really answering your question directly, but we've kind of approached this from a different angle, which is looking at the relationship between Nigeria and Brazil going way back to slavery. And so we're now looking at ways of how we can export our product in completely different ways, enter new markets. So we are now sitting down with Brazilian universities, Nigerian universities, UK universities, and putting together research around this history that is there to engage a new young generation in terms of empowerment and education. And then we are bringing the artists together from the three continents, so UK-based African artists, UK-based Brazilian artists, to work with artists in Africa and to work with artists in Brazil. So there's a whole new rich content that's being created here. And what that means is, through the documentary piece that's also going with it, it allows us to now translate the educational aspect in Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa, Brazilian Portuguese. So it widens the audience and it connects people together. But in terms of competition, as Shola said, you can't take a Western product right now into a UK club where Africans go. They're not paying attention to it right now. It's a completely new generation that's coming out.
And in terms of distribution, could you talk to us about that? Earlier on today, we heard how internet infrastructure is pretty poor.
Yes.
So how does it work? I'm curious.
It's not really a problem as far as we're concerned, because if you, yes, there is power failure and all of those kind of things going on, but the fact of the matter is the country is turning out, the continent is turning out literally billions worth of content, and that's with all the disadvantages that exist over there. So if they're doing that with those disadvantages and without the proper education and the sophisticated this and that whatsoever, imagine if those things were in place. In terms of ourselves, we've set up a distribution outlet with Believe Digital, which is a French company. That means that when we bring African content into the West, we are plugged into over 100 countries over here, and at least we can monetize and control that side of things.
Just answering your question in terms of film, as many of you probably are aware, 95% of the quote-unquote Nollywood films that are made are distributed on DVD. But what you have now is a new trend where filmmakers making more sort of high-concept Nollywood films are sort of holding off the DVD release and releasing it in cinemas and doing the sort of Western festival circuits. So through the Western festival circuits, they can earn higher fees, and obviously in the cinemas, they're able to generate a certain amount of box office. So it's kind of changing. It's starting to change production values in that there have been a number of cases where a film is either done really well or not done so well, and because there is tangible box office to sort of show what audiences liked, because people at the cinemas can say, look, your audience walked out 20 minutes into the film because they didn't like it, it's starting to change the way that filmmakers are conceiving how they interact with their audience of the film, but also making some of the figures around distribution more transparent.
You talked about distribution in an internet and how people get access to it. Very simply this. Everybody has a mobile phone. In fact, if you're in Nigeria, everybody has, yeah, exactly, 2 or 3 or 4 mobile phones, simply because of the network. And you'll be amazed that something like about 80% of the coverage from listening to music to watching videos, YouTube clips, are done on mobile phones. Simple as that. So that's why MTN makes so much money.
I saw a couple of hands go up, so what we'll do, just take a batch of 3 questions, and then you can either address to the entire panel or to individuals, so that way we can get more in. So if the gentleman at the front over there would like to go first, and the lady at the back, and then there was a third person. Okay, the gentleman at the back as well. So, please.
Sorry, it's Adrian Dipanoff. I'm a finance student here. You kind of answered my question, but I'll ask it anyway. If you look at Nollywood, it's always been known in terms of volume. I mean, it's a high volume being pushed out. What are the key ingredients for it to make an evolution to a higher quality product at the end? I mean, is it the cinemas? Is it on the distribution side, funding, directors? Yeah, how does it make that evolution?
Okay, and the lady at the back, please.
You mentioned like content in Yoruba or things like that, and I was wondering, where do you think the linguistic focus should be in the market? Will it progress towards a more English-focused market where you can distribute everywhere, or will you be focusing on sort of local linguistic production?
Thank you. And the gentleman at the front, well, in the middle. If you come down one row, yeah, brilliant.
Thank you. My name is Miles Mujwete, and my question is directed at, it's Shola. We're a B2B media company, and I was just interested. I was just curious to know from what we've noticed, there's a lot of international companies that are active within the exhibition and within the MICE industry, as we call it, that are looking to geoclone events across Africa on the back of the sort of growth story that's happening. Is that something that you're noticing specifically within the entertainment industry in terms of international interest that's moving into that space?
Okay, so to summarize the first 2 questions, the key ingredients for better Nollywood content quality, the second was on the linguistic focus, and the third was...
Okay.
Indeed.
Just to kick off
Please.
with the first question, certainly what is already happening are we are seeing now some sort of higher concept Nollywood films, as I'd mentioned, and I would certainly say that this has partly come about by more increased interaction with diaspora filmmakers and the wider sort of film industry in the West. So, for instance, you have many filmmakers who are sort of doing their post-production in Europe or other places. Some of them are raising finance, sort of higher-level budgets elsewhere, engaging cast outside of Nigeria. And basically sort of taking on tidbits of models that are used more widely in the West. In terms of the second question about linguistics, one thing I can say is that at present there is a slight increase in more minority language films within the Nollywood genre, and apparently this is a growth area. So filmmakers who are, say, making films in the sort of non-represented dialects are finding that they're getting larger audiences because more often than not, they might be the only filmmakers making films, as terrible as they might be. So yeah, that's my little contribution.
In terms of quality of the Nollywood movies, as we see now, they're quite high. look at the last flight to Abuja that was premiered here in the UK, the Mirror Boy, again, you know, they're quite high. They're working very hard to compete with the global market. So we're quite happy with where we're going. In terms of linguistic and, you know, getting the Nollywood movies and other African movies to the global market, I think we should work towards swaying the global market to also kind of learn our languages. You know, I don't see why we should, you know, completely change and make our films in English.
I'd like to add to that. My take on it is this. You know, when you're talking in terms of the languages, if you listen to Jamaican music, raga, reggae, bashment, they did it in their patois, was embraced by Marley, took it worldwide. You could go to China, they wouldn't understand a word he's singing, but everyone's singing along. It's a hit. Same thing, I remember the time when Bollywood movies were at the height of movie industry in the world. And I remember being in Nigeria, we'll sit there, I don't know a word they're saying, but we'll sing along, once again, and endorse it. Right now, as Nadia mentioned, or I think it was Pauline, one of you mentioned, there's a new sense of pride in being African right now. The way I look at it when we are approaching music, there are over 10 million Africans in the UK. Then if I now look at how many Africans exist in Europe, when we are trying to sell our product, me and my business partners, we're looking at capturing the African crowd. Because the music industry works in such a way where if you go begging, knocking, please, 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 they're not going to pay any attention to you. You need to create your own hype, create your own buzz. Once that happens, the people that control money will all of a sudden come to you. And it's about bargaining power. We work to make the bargaining power shift. We're not doing this to conform to what it is you want us to conform to. We're doing this because we have identified our market. We know where they exist. And the beauty of being African is when you come to the UK or other European countries, we have something, for example, in Nigeria, it's called CANUC, Central Association for Nigerians in the UK. What that means is, let's say there are 100 tribes in Nigeria. CANUC represent that same 100 tribes. They find each one of those tribes over here. It's all online registered. So if you become a member of CANUC, it happens in the UK, France, Italy, Germany, America, etc., etc. So when we are plugging our product, we are plugging into CANUC, which then, for a click of a button online, we are connecting with our people in the different languages. We don't need to sell to the wider community. That doesn't mean we're not interested in selling to the wider community. But when the wider community comes, it will be on our terms, and the bargaining power will be in our control. And that's our approach.
And I think what Ike says there, and I'm going to answer your question in a minute, is very crucial. I mean, I started off really doing in the bridal industry, and then I set up a modeling agency, but the agency was for models of color, called Mahogany Models. And it was very difficult, and it still is, where models don't or find it very difficult to break into the mainstream. And went through this process. I don't know how many of you knew about the Italian Vogue issue, where they put all black models together. And, my company was instrumental in making that the biggest Vogue selling ever. And it wasn't just about promoting that magazine, it was about promoting the message. But I mean, very soon after that, things changed for a few seconds, and then it went back to normal. And the message I then started telling everybody then was about 5 years ago, is that it's now time for change. Let's do things for ourselves. And this goes back to what Ike is saying. The shift in Africa generally has changed. We are no longer, I don't mean in a horrible way or in a nasty way or a rude way. We don't care if you bring us your finance anymore. We don't care if you put us on Vogue or Cosmopolitan. You know, we don't care if you don't give us a role in the next Hollywood blockbuster. Because as far as we're concerned, we did the maths. And the maths were very simple. If you added up the population of Europe, you added up the population of United States of America, it came to less than the population of the whole of Africa. So why not just sell to ourselves? And that's what we started doing. And in doing that, we have now started seeing, and this is coming to your question, that because we no longer don't care and we're doing our own thing, and you see like the likes of the band making international sales across the world and working with Kanye West and people like that, and you see Nollywood films like Last Flight to Abuja, The Figurine, Mirror Boy, Ije make international breakthroughs in Cannes and across the world. People start saying, what's going on there? And then you then have MTV Base say, whoa, okay, we need to get into Africa. And you have the MTV Awards. You have big companies, both from within South Africa and outside of South Africa, that are now saying, we need to build big arenas, big stadiums, music concert halls and stuff like that. Because the biggest music concert hall we have in Nigeria is Echo Hotel. You heard the word, hotel, okay? All right, that's our biggest venue at the moment. And I can tell you this now as a fact, to hire that place a day is the equivalent of about £40,000 a day, all right? I don't even have a venue here. And the capacity is only 5,000 people, all right? And that is booked every single day, day in, day out. I'm not saying just weekends, I'm saying every single day. All right, that just gives you a little bit of an idea of what the demand is like within Africa. You've got Sony. Sony are giving away a music contract for the X Factor winner. All right, these are big companies that have started realizing, whoa, there's money here, and it's cash money. All right. Okay.
Thank you. Just focusing on the numbers a little bit more, the cash money and the sort of returns within your respective sectors. I don't know if you're able to, I mean, one thing about the creative industries in the whole world, not just in Africa, it's hard to get enough data to support investing within these sectors as a sort of viable opportunity. So I don't know if you have any numbers to help sort of thwart that stereotype. Can you talk a little bit more about maybe some of the projections you'd expect if you had to create a large stadium or, you know, a large PRS collection facility in Africa? What revenues do you anticipate?
Coming to a business forum like this, a conference, and not being able to give facts and figures is quite embarrassing. But the truth of it is, at the moment, we don't care about numbers. I know it sounds silly, yeah? But the fact of the matter is, I want to put on a fashion show, all right? And so long as it is full, and so long as I made money, it was a good show, and the numbers speak for itself. But if you then came to me afterwards and said to me, okay, Shola, how many people did you have passed through the doors? I might estimate it, fine. You know, and they say, can you do another show? And I'll say yes. But if you ask me how much I made, I can give you the exact figure. That's how we work in Africa. You understand? All right? Talk to me about money, and I will give you the statistics true and true. It is one of the things that we are starting to work on, because now when you go to the sponsors are having to be a lot more diligent. They need facts and figures. They do need to be able to substantiate it. I mean, 5-10 years ago, you could go to any bank, Guaranteed Trust and whatever, and you could say, I'm doing a reality TV program based on that chair. The chair will not move for 10 hours, and that's what the program's about, and they will give you £5 million. Nowadays, they can't do that anymore. There's a lot more regulation. That's across the whole of Africa now. So I do believe that within the next 2 to 3 years' time, we will have a lot more figures. And I mean, I think the same thing counts within the film industry, because what tends to happen, and I'm sure Nadia will speak about it much better than I, is that because of piracy and stuff like that, what basically used to happen is I wake up this morning, I decide I'm making a film. By 10 o'clock in the evening, the film has been produced and edited, seriously, has been produced and edited, and the next day I go to somebody and I say, look, I've got this film, give me the equivalent of, I don't know, £500,000. I take my £500 and I walk away. The pirates then go and reproduce it and sell it. that's how it's been. But with the advent of cinema and stuff like that, things are starting to change, but I don't think the numbers or the figures are in there yet, but Nadia might know.
I would sort of dovetail that. Certainly there's been a lot of fudging of figures with Nollywood, and you know, it's one of the sort of like major complaints that it's difficult to access the figures and be accurate. One of the things that is changing, as I mentioned earlier, is the development of more cinema chains means that there are hard copies, there are receipts that can sort of, you know, be returned and show what the percentages were in terms of box office, etc. And it also means that there can be more of an interest in terms of international investment, because this has been one of the main inhibitors with the Nigerian film industry in terms of that level of investment, that investors want to know how they're going to get their money out, and you know, what are the sort of previous examples that have existed that have enabled that. And clearly, you know, if you have an industry which is up to 50% pirated, you know, it's quite discouraging.
I would say in terms of facts, one fact I can give is this. When African artists come into this country, they're not on your mainstream radio, they're not on your mainstream TV, they're not even in your newspapers. You don't even know they've come in here. But guess what? They're packing out your major venues. 2-3 days straight, packed out. And the starting ticket price is somewhere in the region of about £50. That's the starting ticket price. In Africa, we do starting tickets, gold, silver, bronze, VIP, then VVIP, then VVVVIP. I'm not joking. The high-end tickets in the UK, the high-end tickets, you'll be paying thousands. And guess what? We come out and pay this. We endorse it. Then we fly back. Now, on the flip side, you have your Adeles, your Tiny Tempers, your Stereophonics, and all of those. With all the major record tour endorsements, they're on the billboards, they're on the adverts, they're on everywhere, and they're still not packing out these venues. Africa is moving. Yeah, we're moving without you guys knowing what's going on. We're coming in. They don't even want to come over here anymore to live. They just want to come here, do their shows, and go back home. It is booming. That's a fact I will give you. And you can go to your, O2, Shepherd's Bush Empires. They will give you the facts and figures if you really want to know. They're a trusted source for you. They'll give you the figures you want.
Okay, we'll get Pauline's response and then a final batch of 3 questions before we have to wrap up because we're running out of time. Please.
Give statistics.
Yes.
With regards to East Africa, with the West African artists that come to East Africa. For instance, you get P Square coming to Kenya and they can fill a stadium of about, between 80,000. They come to Uganda, they do 100,000. They come to Rwanda, they do 120,000. So the figures are there in terms of music. They fill the stadiums. They absolutely fill them. Yeah.
So the final batch of 3 questions, please. The lady in the red jumper.
I'll just speak up. Hi. Thank you very much. It's amazing to see the passion in all that you're sharing. Thank you for that. Seems to be that all of you have kind of worked in UK and then moved towards Africa in one of the countries. Have you seen yourself change your working style in any shape or form to adapt yourself to? Is there anything you kind of raise the volume or kind of put down the volume in your working styles? I'd be very interested to know.
The second question, please. Was there a hand up in the back? Okay. Do you have just one question for this round?
I've got a final question. I wondered, it sounds like there needs to be some study around the figures, and it sounds like there's an opportunity perhaps for some students at Cambridge Business School to do something in terms of a global consultancy, perhaps. And I wondered, are there studies out there, maybe by Ernst & Young or PwC, or is there a void?
Okay.
I'll answer the first question.
Please.
AMG, I think they're one of the sponsors, aren't they?
I'll answer your question in style that involves leadership. I'm still based in the UK, although born in Africa, but I'm sure with everything that I'm doing, which yes, I'm planning to move back in very, very, very few years to come to set up a studio and other things. But with everything that I'm doing, I'm sure in Africa I might be able to do it in a different style. I've done my research from my parents always going back to Africa backwards and forwards because they have large farms, and they come back and give me a report on how to, the leadership there and how to handle their employees and how to handle, letdowns and how to handle, some of the challenges that, obviously, Sola, we've been discussing before, in terms of funding and in terms of getting the right professionals. Of course, it will be a very, very different leadership style from what I experience here.
And sorry.
For myself, yes, we adapt in Africa. I think one of the key things when you go into Africa is, I think the last panel, someone mentioned it, have partners, have people. We've got 2 team members that work in Africa for us. They're on the ground there. They love the mentality, it's their approach. But at the same time, we have advisors. That's people who have already, if you want to say, made their wealth. So they can advise us from a tactical point of view in terms of how to maneuver as we step into Africa. Third thing is we've also placed ourselves with key governing bodies in Africa who are very passionate about the whole music and monetizing and facts and figures and things like that. On the other question of study around figures, I can only speak for ourselves. When we were planning 3 years ago, developing our business model, that was one of the first things we did. We did a study on the African music industry, and we really put it facts and figures. We compared it to what went on in the Caribbean, what's going on in the UK and the American market. So that automatically gave us credibility. We were able to back it with real solid facts and figures.
Just to add to that, I mean, certainly there are figures available in terms of the film industry in Nigeria, but there's disagreement about which ones are accurate. And also there's secrecy. There are certain individuals who have vested interest in it being very vague. And then, of course, the whole sort of piracy issue means that people are sort of estimating. So certainly, yes, I think there's scope for a study to be done, but I wouldn't want to suggest that there are no figures, because there are. And, even, for instance, the cinema chains, they have box office returns on, which films have done what and so on. But it's just that I don't think the industry is yet at a stage where people are used to the publishing of quite specific figures quite yet, yeah.
Answer your question about the differences in working here and working there, and whether there's a difference. I'm trying to think about how I put it into words. We were discussing this earlier when we were just talking about our experiences. And when you work here, everything works smoothly, it works on time, you can send somebody an email and they get it done, and so on and so forth. And I think a good way to give you an idea of understanding the difference is for me to give you an example. I went to do my first event in Nigeria in 2009. And it was quite a big event. It was for the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. They were doing a big gala event, and they brought me in to come and do it. And they told me that we would have 2 days to set up. For me, that was heaven sent, because here, because of money, paying per hour, you normally set up on the day, and then do the show that same day, and that was it. And I thought, this is absolutely heaven sent. So I came in, the guys had brought all the equipment on the Friday evening, and I thought, brilliant. In the morning, because they were going to do a night build, I thought in the morning, they would have all been built, everything would be fantastic. I went off to bed. I came back the following morning thinking we'd do rehearsals and so on and so forth. If I put it into a percentage terms, in terms of setting up, 100% being that they had set up fully, and of course 0% being that they hadn't done anything, we had achieved about 5%. Okay? And then, that in itself was an eye-opener, and it was something that I quickly learned, that no matter how efficient you are, no matter how much production sheets you've done, call sheets, plans, and so on and so forth, you have to work with the local content, you have to be with them, you have to talk them through everything, and you have to watch everything. Do you understand? But at the same time, you can still have your quality controls. I am very insistent I will start on time, I will do what I have to do, and so on and so forth. But I can see Dorian's about to drive me off the stage. But there is a big difference, a massive difference.
Thank you for that insight. I think to wrap up real quick, we've heard a lot of insight regarding the fact it's necessary, and I think that's a common theme today, necessary to have local partners, be aware of the local culture as well when you're going to engage with the local consumers, etc. And with specific interest in the entertainment and media industry, I think it's worth mentioning that it's not just the returns on investment that one should look at. I know that there are facts and figures, as you mentioned, Nadia, but culture as an export sometimes is a way to get people to access your culture. Look at South Korea. It's from exporting their culture, the music, to the Asia-Pacific region, they were able to get more people to buy into them. I was just recently in Turkey, and something I learned was the Turks have also been quite big on their media sector, so they export heavily to the Middle East, and they do, on the back of that, have a lot of investors from the Middle East and Russia that will watch their Turkish soaps, listen to Turkish music, participate in Turkish culture, and then invest in Turkey. So if that's a model on which to base investments in Africa on, then it's worth looking at a double bottom line, if you like, the return on specific cultural entertainment, but also on the bigger picture, making it more accessible. So with that, I'd like to give a round of applause to our wonderful panel. And thank you so much for the insight.